What's a neat hobby that is inexpensive?
Reading. The library is free.
3D stuff. Blender is free, and if you are skilled, you can even sell your creations.
Cooking is a great hobby that can actually save you lots of money.
Learning a new language for free on Duolingo. You don't have to commit to learning to fluently speak it. Just have fun learning the basics, and don't worry about what you'll use it for IRL. Who knows? Maybe one day you'll need to say, "I am eating horse pizza at a park," in French.
Disc golf. Top-tier hobby, costs like $20 to start.
My friends and I have a creative writing group that meets once a week. None of us are professional writers, but it's fun to sit down, all write about a shared prompt, then compare what we come up with.
Photo and music editing. There are tons of free programs.
Playing a sport can be inexpensive. You could play chess. There's ton of free videos on YouTube to teach a lot of stuff.
Gardening. A bag of potting soil, a 6-pack of plants from your local nursery, and some cheap or free pots from Craigslist will get you started. Watch out, though. Gets addictive.
I used to like building plastic models. It was nice when I didn't care how they looked. Then I joined model makers and started watching YouTube videos on different techniques. Before I knew it, I was dropping $250 on a nice Iwata airbrush. More on a compressor. Then tons on quality paints. Not to mention I was buying very expensive models because I wanted to make something unique. Then I had a house fire a week after moving. During the move, all the models I had previously built broke and the house fire destroyed my model building area. It is nice to be free finally.
Any hobby gets super expensive if you get deep enough into it, but if you keep it light, disc golfing is great. I've found 99% of my discs and courses are almost always free.
Define inexpensive. My least expensive hobbies would be reading and fishing. While they still have a cost, you can start with less than $50 and still have a good time.
Foraging. It costs you nothing.
Language learning. Learning new musical instrument, cheap ones like flute, harmonica, kalimba. Learn to do impressions.
Woodwork. Buy a $30 jigsaw, some sandpaper, wood glue, and some clamps. Make something simple like a cutting board. Polish it. Use it. Point to it and say, "Made that."
Crochet. Dollar Tree carries yarn and even hooks sometimes, so you could get started for $2. I couldn't find any hooks at my local DT, so I went to Hobby Lobby and spent $10 on a hook and a pretty skein of yarn. 2 weeks later and I'm working on a blanket. Honestly, you only need one skein to start. I did a bunch of practice stitches until I felt comfortable. Then I unraveled the whole thing and started on my project. There's tons of free patterns online and I learned all through YouTube.
Rock collecting is fun. Don't fall into the trap of buying what you don't have. Keep it to 100% finding only.
I worked a lot with the abandoned railroads, as well as some research on my own, converting old maps to Google Maps and finding out where a lot of old buildings and places used to be in my area. You can spend hours and hours researching on loc.gov and it all costs nothing but time. I am really big into railroads, specifically streetcars and interurbans, that are extremely difficult to map because they weren't around for very long. I've found multiple buildings that are still standing and some depots, as well as some information, pictures, and even visited right-of-way that was essentially lost until I dug it up. It's fascinating stuff. However, I did all of this while I was laid off during COVID. I just don't have the time now. If you really want to get specific and involved, Mississippi has maps that are down to the individual rails, switches, buildings, and the guys working there are as accurate as possible. I have some maps I started to do this detailed, but never finished.
Reading. Playing guitar can be relatively inexpensive. Buy a cheap acoustic and learn off of YouTube.
Running, knitting, gardening.
Juggling. Can be helpful for relaxation and focus. Can also be a great workout.
Rock collecting is pretty cool and free. My friend collects a rock at every place he goes hiking.
Masturbation.
Warhammer 40k. Oh wait, inexpensive. Gardening.
Personally, writing fanfiction. Have an idea for a story from your favorite series? Write a fanfic. Disagree with canon in any capacity? Write a fanfic. Just like the series and want to go off the rails with them? Write a fanfic. As long as you have Google Docs and the like, a connection to the internet and an account for the various fanfic sites, you're good to go. The best part is that you don't have to devote hours a day to it. 15 minutes of writing a day and eventually it will come to pass.
If you have friends, role-playing games. Many rule sets are free or inexpensive, and then you just need pen and paper. Actual dice can be replaced with an app. You'll have to provide your own imagination, though. And getting people to show up is hard. But it's a lot of fun when it works.
Leather working surprisingly enough.
Nerf plus modifying Nerf guns. Buy a cheapo one for $5 from a thrift store, jam a spring in, Dremel out some plastic and double the power.
Making plush videos, all you need is a few plushies, a camera, and a good plot.
Learning a language. For about $40 Canadian, I bought a language book. In the book was a link to their website which had audio files, spelling exercises and generally just a lot of tools to help you.
Fishing is generally inexpensive unless you spring for top-tier gear. You can get some decent lures and crankbait for a couple bucks each. Hooks are cheap on their own and worms to bait them cost a couple bucks. If you aren't opposed to getting your hands dirty, you can break the worms in half of smaller to stretch them over a longer trip. The most expensive items would be a fishing pole, license, and tackle box. Everything else you need is cheap stuff.
VHS collecting. Almost every Goodwill has tapes for $1.50 and flea markets sell them from anywhere from $2.25 if you're into film. It's fun and cheap way to watch and collect.
Cleaning. It's neat and you just need water and a wipe.
Magnet fishing. I really want to get into it in the next year.
Tatted lace. You can get a basic shuttle anywhere from 20 cents, cheap ones on Alibaba, to a couple of dollars. Generally size 8 mercerized crochet thread is used. It's not necessarily easy to learn, but once you do you don't need to put out much money for supplies. Sewing, on the other hand, is not cheap. Fabric is expensive, machines are expensive, and you need way more notions, buttons, zippers, thread, etc., than you would think. And it can take quite a while to learn all the proper techniques to make your own clothing properly.
You can make any hobby expensive. But fishing and camping.
Singing and dancing.
Following strangers around and observing their habits.
Sex with wife.
Going to the library and reading.
Drawing. All you really need is paper and a pencil.
Gardening. I grow tomatoes and peppers and few other items and make spaghetti sauce. It's just time and water, some fertilizer and stuff.
Digging holes randomly in the backyard. Please don't judge me.
Video games. While the upfront costs may seem expensive, the cost-to-fun ratio is for the charts compared to nearly every other hobby out there. You could snag a cheap PS4 and a few games for sub $200 and would have hundreds of hours of stuff to enjoy. It's also a hobby that can fit into your daily life easily, whereas things like bowling or hiking have a lot of prep, travel time that makes it hard to fit into a traditional workday.
Being a nice beep person.
May your day be filled with joy and happiness. And please remember to subscribe to Upvote for the best quality content every day.